is tea time. Yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time. Making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time.
Well, welcome everybody. We are in the evening. We had an amazing day. This morning we started off with Michael Gardner, and then we went over to Jeff Risley. Now we have the incredible Scott Overton sitting in the back, and we're going to talk some science fiction. Like this afternoon, like I said with Jeff, we're going to keep talking science because he brought up some science too this afternoon. So we're going to just keep it going with science. So grab your tea, grab your coffee, grab your dinner if you haven't eaten yet. And it's really important. And we're going to get started here. And we're going to get Scott to share us a good, cool tea as he's sitting in the back, getting his tea brewing. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz myself is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any Tea Time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith. However, may bring forward dialogues and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All Tea Time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment in taking any action that may relate to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussion for some where they may be emotionally at risk, and it is significant to know that the show is engaging in forms only to offer and inspire awareness and connection and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about the disclaimer or the panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in tonight's show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that the show is not made for you at this time, I respect that, and I will see you at a later show at a later date and time. And again, all tea times are done on Thursday in 2023, unless it's a rescheduled tea time, then it'll be on Monday or Tuesday. Now, a little bit on Scott Overton. As you've seen in the intro video, there's science fiction, there's broadcasting. He's in Northern Ontario. Everybody knows Miss Liz is from Hearst, Ontario. I'm a Northern girl. So tonight we're going to talk a lot of Ontario and a lot of good things that a lot of people might not even know exist in Ontario, in the northern part. So we're going to get Scott in here. He is a broadcaster, previous morning show host, radio host, author of science fiction. He is an incredible community service volunteer. He's done amazing things with Easter seals and all of that good stuff. He decided to write science fiction. Where'd it go? Scott's first novel was a mystery thriller, Dead Air, is set in the radio world and was shortlisted for a Northern Light Award in Northern Ontario, Canada. Though trained as an actor in university, Scott left the stage and screen behind to become a broadcaster, and then finally pursued his lifetime desire to be a science fiction writer. Since then, he has taken the readers to strange places, including the human bloodstream in his science fiction novel Debate, The Prometheus Labyrinth, a science fiction thriller that reviewers compared to the work of Michael Crichton. I think I'm saying it right, Question. I'll get him to say it when he's out here. In his novel, Nadia chronicles a reluctant hero with an alien being living inside of him. And for more on Scott's incredible books and all of that, we're going to talk about that during the show today, this evening. I'm going to get Scott in here, and I'm going to take a sip of tea, and we're going to spill, and we're going to flow, and we're going to have some giggles. So welcome, Scott.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Miss Liz. It's great to be here.
Today is just one of those days where I'm just off. I think I'm just rambling and I'm all over the place. I'm not sure what the heck is going on. I think maybe it's the moon. It's got to be a power moon or something out there. So Scott, tell us a little bit about who you are and as a little guy, and who you are now.
Well, you mentioned a lot of my background being in radio for more than 30 years altogether. But when I was a kid, I loved reading science fiction, and my father was a big fan of science fiction. So we would read the same books, and we'd have big discussions around the dinner table around tea, because we'd have tea after dinner, and we'd be sitting around drinking our cups of tea and talking about science fiction. So that was a perfect lead up and preparation for us here tonight, Liz. I mean, it's a perfect fit.
Right.
As far as that goes, anything else, I guess I was like any kid, dreaming of spaceships and such then, but there's a whole lot more depth to science fiction than just that. And I also always loved nature. And so I always have been pretty close to nature when it comes to the way I've chosen to live through through all my years, really. If I could live on a lake, I would, and have several times and am now. So, yeah.
Well, before we went live, you were saying that you live on an island, right?
That's right. I live on an island in northern Ontario, so it's kind of out in the bush a bit. And there are challenges, but it's also an absolutely beautiful place to live. And we've got some privacy, and we've got nature scenes around us all the time, and birds and wildlife. So we just love it.
So do you have to come in and out with a boat?
I do. Yep. Everything that comes here has to be brought by boat. And then we have to make special arrangements for, winter freeze up and spring breakup and everything like that. We've generally stayed here for the past couple of years on spring breakup, but not stayed through on freeze up. So, that's one of those things. We leave while the lakes are freezing. You can't get back and forth. It's probably not safe to stay. But breakup generally is quicker, so we've stayed through.
So you stay somewhere else when the ice comes?
Well, basically, we go and visit family who are mostly in southern Ontario, and we spend a little time with them, which, I mean, it works out because Christmas is around that time anyway, and we would be going to visit. We just end up going a little bit early and stay with some of our relatives.
Oh, well, that's pretty cool, right?
That's
the northern way. That's what we do in the north, right? Is we just we visit a lot, and we drink a lot of tea. A lot of people don't realize how much tea we actually drink. We're not really big coffee drinkers in the north. We drink a lot more tea.
Well, I drink coffee in the morning and I drink tea in the evening, after dinner, always. And sometimes for an extra drink, in the later evening, herbal tea or whatever.
Yeah, my grandma always used to have her hot tea, but then she put like a little bit of spice in it, and she'd be like, "You guys didn't see that bottle." We're like, "Okay."
I don't do that too much, but still, I can't say I never have.
So, Scott, you started off with mystery and thriller. What got you into science fiction?
Well, there are two sides to that question. As I was saying, I grew up with science fiction and loving it and always wanted to be a science fiction writer. But as you will know from talking to other writers, they always say, write what you know. So when I was a radio broadcaster, I thought it might be a good idea for my first published book to be about the radio industry. There are some books about the radio industry, but not all that many. And I thought I could offer something in the way of the inside view of how particularly a medium-sized radio scene book is set in Sudbury, Ontario, which is where I did live at the time, and I still live fairly near there. It's a medium-sized city. And so a fairly small community, and there organizations featured in the book, like the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. I was a volunteer for many, many years for them. So I had that experience to throw in. And so that's basically why. And then after that book, I got into writing the science fiction. But that book is still my bestseller, really, because a lot of people think, well, I like mystery thriller ideas. And this is about a morning radio guy that I was. A death threat when he comes into work one day, and he wants to pass it off as a joke, but it's not. So it's about the vulnerability of media people. And he has to, first of all, cope with that unthinkable situation. And secondly, eventually try to figure out who and why, he's having someone try to take his life. It's a good book, and lots of people love it, but they aren't always sure that they like science fiction. So they gravitate to that one first and then may try the others. I hope so.
Well, and I guess as a broadcaster, you see a lot of things too, right? You get a lot of stories and it actually brews in pot, right? It's like, oh, I could change this character. I could change that story. I could twist it a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. You meet an awful lot of people, and so many listeners are wonderful, but for good and bad, they think they know you, and they think you're part of their lives. They wake up every morning with you. They think of you as a friend, perhaps. But if you do something that really upsets inadvertently, unintentionally, you offend someone. And then, then they got their backup. And if they have any issues anyway, anger issues or who knows what, it can be a problem. I never had any kind of threats like that myself, but I did know another morning man whose young daughter was stalked on her way home from school and such. And that's a disturbing thing,
Yeah. So you've done broadcasting and you've done the radio. Do you find that there's a difference?
Well, I don't do a lot of webcasting or anything like that. And what I was doing was private radio. So it wasn't the CBC, although I enjoy the CBC. Private radio, it was like what you think of as a private radio DJ, playing music and talking in between and running contests and taking calls from listeners and all those things. And you do an awful lot of public appearances, huge amount of public appearances if you're a morning man. It was all entertaining. I had, as you mentioned in the intro, I had worked. My specialty in university was drama, and I almost became an actor. I did a lot of performing at that time, and I kind of thought I could combine two loves of mine, music and performing, and get a regular salary out of it too, because there certainly isn't regular salaries when it comes to the acting world. And it worked out. I mean, it was a job. It had some points that weren't great, but there was a lot of it to love.
So you were a morning show host. Would I know the morning show that you were on?
Oh, I mean, that was just on a radio station in Ontario, so I don't think you would know it. At that time, nobody was streaming radio shows online or anything like that. So it was just me. It was the Scott Overton morning show on a radio station, first of all, called CIGM, which was a country station. It's no longer in existence. It has been sold and become a hot format radio station in town, actually. And then I worked with what you would consider an oldies station for a short while, and I enjoyed that too. So, both were great.
So you're a classic country guy, right?
Well, I mean, I kind of hit the country radio scene in the 80s. And I don't know how much you grew up on country music, Liz, but, at that time, Alabama had just come around, and they were the first big selling country group. There were bands and singing quartets and things like that. But when it comes to groups or bands, like we think of rock bands, Alabama was the first big country one to hit it big. So they were around. Ronnie Millsap was big. There were quite a few of those artists at that time. Of course, Shania Twain a little bit later on. And Shania had been born in Timmins and went to school in Sudbury. So when she did her first world tour, she did the first two shows of her first world tour in Sudbury. And I got to kind of introduce the show, which was kind of nice. And, I had met her before that, but we didn't exactly at that point get a lot of access to her. So those were the acts. But then even getting in the 80s, you grew up still learning to love Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard and Waylon Jennings and meeting all those people, Tanya Tucker. Yeah, I
Yeah.
got to meet them all and introduce their shows, and it was good.
Yeah, I'm the old classic girl. I grew up on Charlie Pride and Conway Twitty
Yeah,
and George Jones, Tammy Wynette, like all the old stuff. And I
yeah.
listen to the new stuff and I'm like, that's not country.
Yeah, it doesn't do it for me the same. I mean, those people back in the day, the Merle Haggards and Waylon Jennings and stuff, they wrote a lot of their songs. They had a very, very distinctive sound. And now there's just a lot of it that does sound a little too much alike to me. But, times change.
So, who was your favorite artist?
Who is my favorite musical artist?
Yeah, classic country.
Gee, that is a tough one because I did love Ronnie Millsap. I also
Oh,
loved
yes.
a band called Restless Heart,
Oh, they were good.
who weren't as big as Alabama, but they had some really great stuff. And there were a lot of others that were favorites of mine who were Canadian acts, like Michelle Wright and Patricia Conroy was very big. But the band Prairie Oyster were friends of mine too. So there were a lot of them in that day that had a lot of success, and we would see them fairly often, every couple of years or whatever. They'd be in town, so we'd be able to get a chance to get together. But as far as that goes, there were so many really good ones. Loved Garth Brooks, of course, Alan Jackson, Ronnie. I'm thinking Randy Travis. So many people would have loved
Yeah.
Randy's stuff, and it really was a lot of crossover material too that hit well. Yeah, great acts.
So, could you ever see yourself bringing a country artist into one of your science fiction novels?
That has never crossed my mind. I never have thought of that. I don't know. That could work. I suppose you could find a way to make that work.
Well, we had
Yeah.
some really good
I
legends
mean,
back
the
then,
the
right?
whole concept is, yeah, the original, the kind of characters or who's a real original, right? They live life their way, and they tell it like it is, and you can certainly see that kind of character fitting in almost any kind of story, really.
Yeah. I always pictured somebody doing it with classic country artists like spirits or something, like a good ghost story or something. Them coming back from, the Grand Ole Opry or, and then spaceships come. My mind is like all over the place, right? Like, but I'm just like, it can be done, can it? Like,
Well, there was that movie Cowboys and Aliens based on a graphic novel series, I think. I don't think country music fit into that in a big way that I recall, but you never know. You could try it again. You might hit something really big there, Miss Liz.
yeah. Well, you never know. It might be your next book, Scott.
I'll have to think about it.
You'll be like, oh, that Miss Liz.
Get all the song lyrics. Actually, that's always a problem. My novel Dead Air, when I originally wrote it, my first one, I wanted to put in all kinds of song lyrics because it fits for a radio format sort of thing. I had all the song lyrics picked out, little snippets of great pop songs of the time, and I couldn't do it because it was just going to be too expensive. You have to get the rights to every single one, and I just can't. It would have been great though.
Yeah, just going outside of the box, just thinking outside of the box and doing it. That's what aliens do, right? That's what spaceships is all about, right? They're different, they're unique, they come and they glow. So I want to talk a little bit about your book, Scott,
Yeah.
because you have a few books, but I want to talk about the latest book that you have out that's in the promo video. Let me see, I got it here. The
Augmentation.
Argument Nation. Yeah, so let's talk about that
Yeah.
one.
Well, augments. First of all, some people will know that brain computer interfaces are a technology that has been developed actually since about the 70s. The idea being if we could get machines that would read our thoughts, then people who have brain injuries or spinal cord injuries or other central nervous system injuries, then maybe are paralyzed, could control computers, they could control robotic prostheses or whatever it might be with their thoughts. So that has been in the works since about the 70s. Many people nowadays are familiar with Elon Musk's company Neuralink because that is a high profile company working in that area. And it just about a month or so ago got approval for their first human testing from the FDA in the States. So the idea being that you have a device with electrodes from that device planted in your brain to read your electrical signals of your neural synapses and everything like that, and actually interpret your thoughts so that you can do whatever it might be. It may be controlling a wheelchair or a robotic body for that matter. In my book, though, the main character, who is young, he's named David later or early on, and he chooses the name Damon when he becomes an adult. But he gets a brain augment of device of this kind when he's 14 because of a car accident injury, a brain injury from a car accident. And so it helps correct a condition that has developed from this injury. Well, he learns as it goes, and as they do firmware and even hardware updates, he learns to be able to do many, many different things with this ability, with this device. And I postulate that by about 2050, he is an adult in my story, it'll be a consumer item. So these brain augments will not only be a computer that can do all the things that a computer can do to help your memory or your mathematics skills or whatever you might want, but also think your way to the internet. If you want to buy something, you just use, your thoughts, think about it. You're maybe going by a store, you think about it, you say, okay, I want this, I want to pay that price, this is the size I want, and it's done. Or using kind of something equivalent to Google Maps and Google Street View with your thoughts. And I really do think they'll become a commercial item, a consumer item, taking over from our smartphones. But there can be a lot of potential risks, a lot of great potential for good and a lot of great potential for harm, because we know with our smartphones, all the privacy and access to ourselves that we give up willingly by not reading the fine print in a lot of these apps and saying, oh yeah, I want reward points, or I want a free app, or whatever it is. And we give these companies access to our lives, information, personal information about ourselves. So it's a two-way street. And by the time this story takes place, as I say in a blurb for the book, marketing becomes almost like mind control. The marketing can become so invasive that it's very dangerous. And so it's a cautionary book that I would compare to even Fahrenheit 451 or Brave New World or 1984, if you want to go back that far. This is a technology that is coming, and we have to make decisions about how we want it to work and how we want it to be restricted and regulated before it gets here, or we could be in trouble. The laws are always behind technology. And this is going to be a very, very powerful and potentially very dangerous technology. So we have to get working on it.
So what got you into that?
Well, science fiction, as many authors will tell you, may be set 100 years, 1,000 years in the future, or the very near future. Essentially, though, in reality, it's about today. It's about our lives, our society. So this book is really about our smartphones and the risks that we find with that. And although I don't get into the AI thing, artificial intelligence, because to me, the idea of having a device that works with your thoughts and actually has another personality there could be very schizophrenic. I didn't really want to go there, and I don't think people would want to go there. But the technology is still one of those things that has, as I say, huge potential. They're doing with all their smartphones and their smart homes. I don't have any devices that are listening to me all the time. I have Siri turned off on my phone. I don't have any Alexa at home or, Google Home or any of those things. And people might think, oh, I'm a Luddite. I don't like technology. That's not true. I just don't like the idea that everything that's going on in my home is potentially being recorded, listened to, shared with someone else. So it's a privacy thing, not an anti-technology thing.
Yeah, I feel the same way, right? That why should they have all of that access to the private home?
Yeah,
And
I mean,
my daughter has the Google where she gets the lights turned on and she puts the music on, and I'm like seriously, can you not move around? Can you not turn the switch off?
yeah,
So I don't talk much when I go visit my daughter because I'm always thinking this thing is recording me and it's going to probably do some blurb like Miss Liz has said this, da 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 da. So I'm just like, what we got? Give me a cup of tea.
there are anecdotal stories where in homes have been taken by some of the people in some of these workplaces that monitor these things and potentially recorded, potentially get in the wrong hands. How much truth there is, I don't have the proof on hand, but I don't want to take a risk personally. If you have this device listening for you to say, "Hey Alexa," or "Hey Siri," then it's on and it's linked to some central server somewhere. You can't say that it's not listening. It is listening
Yeah.
because it's listening for you to say that word and then do what you do immediately. You're not going to wait for some long 30-minute boot up when you say, "Hey, Alexa, tell me where the nearest pizza restaurant is." You want that instantly. So it's got to
Yeah.
be listening and hooked up constantly.
Yeah. That's where my fear comes in with technology. That's just a little bit over too much for me. It's in breaching my privacy. Like it's coming in my bubble, and I don't like it at all. My daughter thinks it's hilarious that I'm just like no. And series I had on my phone when I first got it, and the thing was answering me, and I was like, I'm not even talking to you. Like, and my kids are laughing. They're like, "Mom, you're having a conversation with your phone." And I was like, "Well, that thing is answering me. I don't know how to turn it off. Turn it off."
Yeah, I mean, your phones can do butt dialing all by themselves. You don't have to have something additional where it's just listening to what you're saying and might respond to anything you're saying that sounds like "Hey Siri" or whatever. You could be saying something that's totally unrelated, but it sounds like that, and go, "Yes, what can I do for you?"
Yeah,
Wait,
it
no,
scared
wasn't
me
talking to
when
you.
yeah, it scared me big time when that. And how can I help you? And I was like, no, you can't. I don't know who you are. Like, just get
Yeah.
off my phone. Get out of my phone. Like, uh,
So again, as I say, with me, it's not a matter of anti-technology. I love technology in so many different ways, but it's the privacy element of
yeah,
it that I'm concerned about. So that's what Augment Nation really is about. The main character ends up having to be, because he's had an augment, a brain computer interface installed, if you like, implanted in his head for all those years, about 10 years by the time they become really popular. He is uniquely placed and skilled and able to help people push back against some of the bad stuff that happens. So he's not intending to be a resistance leader or anything, but he kind of ends up doing that. But it's a very, very human story, too. He struggles as an outcast, especially in school. He's different and, has to learn how all this works. I always like to have really strong themes, technology issue, strong characters, and very human stories in science fiction. I don't like just thinking of what's the next action
yeah.
thing I can make happen. I put lots of action in the books. Don't get me wrong; they're thrillers, but yeah, I mean, there's more important stuff in there. They're deeper than that.
So is there any time travel in this book?
Not in that book, but I have explored time travel. Not only in short stories, but I have one that has a time travel element, and it's a novel called "The Dispossession of Dylan Knox," and that's a long title, and I don't know whether people warm up to it a lot. But Dylan Knox being this character that ends up having multiple personalities in his head, and he's no longer there.
Oh,
And the way it happens, the very first page, the strong female protagonist runs into her old high school flame, Dylan Knox, and says, "Dylan, and she goes to give him a hug, and he says, "Have we met before?" That sends a red flag up right away, and she has to investigate and realize he acts like totally different people every time she spends time with him, and wonders, who are these people, where or when did they come from, and what's their agenda. And while she finds herself kind of falling for him again, who is she falling in love with, and is she going to have to betray him to the authorities as a security risk? So there's a lot in there too. And it's giving away a little bit to say there's a time travel element in there. But yeah, I
I
have
love
other
time
manuscripts
travel.
that have not haven't been published yet that have more overt time travel in them. Yeah,
Yeah, I love
it's a
time
great
travel.
concept. Yeah. Well, I've written some short stories as well. I have a short story collection. I've had quite a few published in. Some of them are time and space oriented and technology oriented and dark or disaster stories. And some of the time travel ones, I have one where basically these people in a future where climate change has really ravaged things get on board this time train and travel back to our time and try to fix things little bits at a time to try to improve their own time. If they can fix what we did wrong, one day at a time, they commute on this train. They commute on this time train back to our era, more or less, and try to fix things so that their era has breathable air and stuff like that. It's kind of a cool story.
It's almost like Back to the Future, or a little bit different.
Well, anything could be related, I suppose, to Back to the Future. That's a classic movie, a wonderful movie.
Right? That was good acting back then too.
Yeah. Yeah,
We
I
need all
enjoyed
the
that
old
one.
classics. I'm like an old soul. My grandma tells me that all the time. I'm an old soul. Scott, I did notice that you have three books that are called Beyond the Time, Beyond the Technology, and Beyond the Stars.
That's right. Yes. Well, when I put them out, I decided I wanted to have something inexpensive for people to buy online as ebooks. And so I gathered three stories on a theme in each of those ones. So, there's the first one was Beyond the Stars. So that's three stories of star travel, space oriented stories. And then Beyond Time is time travel stories, essentially. One of them is it'd be kind of well, I'd have to explain it. And the other Beyond Technology is various things related to technology. I have a couple of others that are mini ebook anthologies as well. And one is called Disastrous because they're disaster stories, and the other is called Body of Opinion because Body of Opinion is one dark story in there where a guy actually gets a replacement body that he thinks is grown in a vat, and it turns out it was actually previously owned, shall we say. So that one's a little bit different. But I collected all those 15 stories from those mini anthologies and put them in a 15-story paperback. So it's
Oh,
just available. It's just called Beyond as a paperback.
so the three of them are all in one book.
Yeah, well, those three anthologies are in that book as well as two others. So essentially, you got 5 mini collections that are only available as ebooks. But if you want all 15 stories, you can buy them as a paperback.
Oh, well, that's pretty cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I noticed on your website, Scott, that you said for the price of a takeout, you could buy some books. So I found that was really
It's true.
interesting.
Well, ebooks, of course, I mean, the big publishers charge a larger price for ebooks. But even though my first book was published by a traditional publisher, and other ones I've published since then, but they are $5.99, and that's the price that I charge for them. It's just a very low price for a novel. And the ebook collections, I think, are $2.99 or $1.99. Now I can't even remember. Actually, my first one, Disastrous, is always free, unless
Oh,
Amazon decides not to do that sometimes. But yeah,
yeah, Amazon. They pick and choose what they want to do with our books.
well, they're supposed to match the price everywhere else. So if you put it free everywhere else, technically they'll make it free. But sometimes you kind of look and go, wait a minute, you're charging people for that one. Okay, I'll fix it if I can. But yeah, $5.99, and I generally charge. I think my paperbacks are $22.95. And as a Canadian yourself, you'll know that Canadians get charged a lot more than the American price.
Yeah.
And yeah, same. I try to keep them the same for both Americans and Canadians, even though there is a big difference in our dollar, the
Yeah.
value of our dollar. That's just something I try to do to help our fellow Canadians a little bit if I can.
Yeah. Well, the exchange rate is always a killer, right? Everybody's like, "Oh, it's only 9.99 US." Yeah. When we do the exchange, it's almost $18. You know,
Yeah,
it's
well,
$8 more, $8 to $10 lately. Like the prices are ridiculous. The exchange rate, I think it should be straight across the board. Everybody should pay the same.
yeah. Well, of course, there's the whole monetary trading market,
Yeah.
which I don't think should happen. I don't think you should be able to trade in a country's currency, but it's not my call, not my charge.
So Scott, I want to get into your tea because we're already halfway through the show. So I want to get to know what your tea is. So if I give you the letter TEA, what three words would you give me starting with those letters?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, the E I could be certainly entertaining, and the T could be thought provoking. That works because I try to make all my work both thought provoking and entertaining. And the A could be action because there's certainly action in them. Um, Maybe that works.
I
Yeah, I guess that could work.
that does align with what you just said about your book, right? Is the thoughts
It does.
and that. So yeah, see, I told you you'd get it. That's just how easy it is when we just let it flow like a good cup of
That
tea, right?
works. Yeah. Well, I think the best science fiction is thought provoking. Like I said, big issues that relate to our own lives, and they should get you thinking. They can be
Yeah.
entertaining, they can be escapist. Sure, have fun with them, no doubt about it. But at the same time, they should also get you thinking because they really start with that. They start with a what if. What if this was the case? What if we could travel through the human bloodstream? Because that's what my first science fiction novel is. It was kind of an homage to a movie called Fantastic Voyage back in the 60s, had Raquel Welch in it. And it was a really, really good science fiction movie. And but it had a shrink ray. So they shrank a submersible and then it traveled through the bloodstream. I thought shrink rays aren't going to happen, I don't think. So how would you do it? Well, with nanotechnology, they are actually making devices that they hope to be able to control in the bloodstream to deliver drugs to a specific site or instrumentation to a specific site. And all I did was actually postulate a real submersible type thing that's controllable like a submersible in the ocean. And the pilot controls it through virtual reality. The problem is when he links to it by virtual reality, he feels like he is the submersible and he's in that body and in that bloodstream. And there's a time dilation effect that makes him eventually have problems distinguishing between one reality and the other, which is the real reality for me. And one of the characters, a psychiatrist, says, when you're in there, that is your reality. So that's one of those things where it's a what if? What if we could do this? What if there were multiple personalities in the same body? What if we had a computer augment that read our thoughts and could connect to the internet? But what would be the problem with that? So, thought provoking. There we go. Educational or entertaining would work, and action. Well, there are always thriller plots there.
So Scott, do you know anybody with like multiple personalities or disorders like schizophrenia?
No, I've never known anybody that I knew had schizophrenia. I have known people who are, that have, various mental issues, I guess you would say. Uh, but then they call them by different terms from time to time. I've never experienced that myself, but it would be very difficult. It would be very difficult to do it. Now, in this case of the dispossession of Dylan Knox, although the name dispossession is kind of riffing on demonic possession, that's not what it's about. Dispossession means actually dispossessing someone from where they belong. They no longer belong there, or they're pushed out of where they belong. So that is what happens in the story. Dylan Knox isn't in that body anymore. It's his body, but there are real personalities in there. They're not demons. It's not a schizophrenic thing, or what do they call it? Dissociative personality disorder or something. I
Yep.
believe it's close to that. They call it now. What we used to call multiple personalities.
Yeah, they,
Yeah,
they they keep switching the names, right? That one year it's called this, the next year it's called this, and then it's after. No, there's two different separate identities. Because I was diagnosed with the DID, the dissociation disorder, and
really.
yeah, at first I was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and then it was multiple personalities, and then it was the dissociation disorder. So they just keep switching it. They just keep giving you different labels and names, and then
Mm,
they find out, oh, it's not that, it's this. So I was like a jar of jams, right? They just kept giving me labels, and it was a different jam. What jam are you getting this month? And I was just like, so I'm really intrigued with when you're
eh,
talking about the mind and the thought process and all of that, because sometimes our thoughts, they do separate into different pods, you know and then we'll be doing dishes and our mind is somewhere else, and like we kind of move all over. So if you had a superpower, or you could have a superpower, Scott, what power would you like to have?
well, I think if it came right down to it, it'd be like what Professor X in the X-Men, who thinks things with his mind. He has powerful telepathy, he has powerful other mental abilities. So it'll probably be that. When I was a kid, I loved a book called The Chrysalids by John Wyndham. It's a classic, goes back to the late 50s or early 60s, maybe, where these kids develop telepathy essentially among themselves in a community after a nuclear war has just devastated most of the world, and they live in a pocket of civilization where people are really afraid of mutations from
Okay.
this nuclear fallout and everything like that. And essentially, the telepathy that they develop is probably a mutation, but they have to hide it because otherwise they'll be killed. So I loved that book, and I've loved almost any kind of story that related to that sort of thing. And I do have, I mean, Augment Nation even kind of features a sort of pseudo telepathy, if you think
Okay.
about it, because if you get two people that have mental computer augments and they're connected to the internet, well, we text each other now, we FaceTime each other or Skype each other now. Maybe you could do something mind to mind like that. So that would be the superpower that I would choose, I suppose. Now, my novel Naida is about a guy who's scuba diving in a lake and finds an ancient alien artifact. It's thousands of years old, but there's
Oh,
still one thing alive in it, and it enters his body, and it's an alien being. And from then on, they have to learn to coexist and communicate. But it does give him some special abilities, particularly in water. So that's a kind of a cool one too. I wouldn't mind having the superpowers, the enhanced powers that this character has. But again, the drawback is he doesn't know what the alien's agenda is. They have to learn to communicate and coexist because they're in it for life. That's it. There's no leaving. And he thinks he might have triggered an alien invasion. And also, who did you tell if this happens? Who could you tell? No one, because you would be a lab rat for the rest of your life. So that's where the human story of that is. But of course, there's also a thriller plot too.
so Scott, do you believe in aliens?
I I'm one of those people that kind of sits on the fence where I say this universe is simply too big for us to be alone, or be the only life forms and even the only sentient life forms in it. I just can't accept that there would be no other beings of intelligence and sentience anywhere else in the universe. Have they come here? I don't know. I can't really say that because the physics are just so
Yeah.
challenging to be able to travel between the stars that I don't know whether that's going to ever be possible in a realistic time frame. So I can't say that, but I would definitely be accepting of the idea of other extraterrestrial beings out there. I just don't see how there could not be.
Yeah, for me it was always the movies, right? Where did these creatures come from? How did they create this makeup where just,
Hmm?
this, like, where did the thoughts come from? Did
And they look
somebody
like
like it,
humans,
right? Like it always had me
right?
questioning. I always questioned a lot, especially when I watch science fiction movies, or movies that have a lot of makeup where they make like aliens or another creature like Avatar. Is that species here? Do we actually have avatars here? I always ask my kids are always like, "Mom, like, come on." And I'm like, "No, like seriously, it is big. The universe is big. So we got to have somebody else out here, you know?" And we get these weird
Yeah.
energies sometimes that maybe something's around us and we don't even know.
Well, I am also, open to the idea of other levels of reality, other levels of existence that we can't perceive. What they are, I don't know. Is it a multiverse? Well, I have some issues with the whole concept of the multiverse. It depends on how you define it, because there are many possible definitions of the multiverse. Not all the Marvel ones, or Spider-Man in the multiverse and everything like that. But I am willing to accept that. I don't know about aliens being among us. Some people are convinced that there are aliens among us. I'm not sure. I mainly because I'm not sure why they would have hidden so long, why they would have kept themselves from us for so long. Um, then there may be a reason. Maybe there really is a reason. Maybe they figure we totally aren't ready for it, and they could be right. But that's probably one of my hangups as far as believing whether they could be here, and the distances involved, the physics involved. I love the idea of Star Trek's warp drive, where you can get in
Right?
your ship and be in
Mm.
another solar system in a week or a few days. The physics just isn't there yet, and it may never allow that.
Yeah. I always question everything, like when I see a movie or I see a film or I read a book, and I'm just like, how did you guys get that idea? Like, was it in a dream? Did you see another show? Did you read it in another book and you're like, "Oh, well, let me add just a little bit of spice to it." It wasn't fast enough, let me get a little faster. They didn't travel enough, let me travel deeper, you know? Like, where do you get your ideas from for any of your books, Scott?
Where do I get them from? I all over the place. There is no single one answer. Sometimes something I'm reading or seeing or watching, will trigger an idea. But again, like a what if? What if you did this? What if this happened? I've got a book coming out that I think will be out within the next month. I haven't been
Oh,
able to. I haven't quite finished with my editor on it, and I hire a professional editor to go through it very, very thoroughly. So it's as good as anything on the shelves. And we're not quite finished, very close. So it'll be out before, I think, the end of September or early October. And it's called Indigent Earth. The idea of that one is the one percenters, the rich people, the powerful, abandon the earth because it's been so damaged with climate change and pollution and everything else you can think of. They leave it, they abandon it and go and live in space colonies that they tell everybody are going to be interstellar spaceships, but they lied. So they go to live in these space colonies out about the distance from the moon, promising to come back to the earth within 500 years to whoever survives that long, left behind. And so this story is set in the time that they've decided to come back. And one of the main characters is a man who lives in a very simple, primitive kind of village, but very comparable to what we think of as a First Nations reserve or reservation, forced into that kind of community. And the other character is someone from the space colonies, who she's a video presenter and actually part of the very high up social hierarchy. Fire and water, one of those fire and water pairings. But it's very much thematically about colonialism, as you might have guessed.
wow.
So, I'm looking forward to that, where the idea for that came from: colonialism. And, there are other different ones. I have another story where I think that maybe Elon Musk's Hyperloop idea was the impetus for it, because I kind of have people on a Hyperloop type train get launched into the future because of an accident. Uh, they come from all over the place. But the thing of it is as a writer, I write science fiction because I don't have ideas for the other kinds of stories. I don't get ideas for historical fiction or family dramas or any of those things. I don't
Yeah.
know how people could come up with ideas that are fresh about those topics. All the only fresh ideas I can come up with are kind of science fiction, oddly out there, off the beaten path kind of ideas.
So when you were in school as
And
a little
even then, they're
boy,
not always,
so Scott, as a little
Mhm.
boy, when you were in school, what was your favorite subject in school?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I mean, certainly I did like science, but I was really into English. I was really into reading and literature and everything like that. So I read voraciously even as a kid. I guess that'd have to be the answer. I never thought about what was my favorite class in school. That's really bizarre.
Yeah, because
Caught me off
I'm
guard.
as you're talking and sharing about your books, I'm like, he had to have loved science, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly did. But again, it was the science fiction element of it. It's the what can be done with this? It's not
Yeah.
just, okay, this chemical added to this chemical makes this compound, but what can you do with that?
Yep.
If you're coming up with a technology that can read your mind and read your thoughts and control devices, what could eventually be done with that? How far could you take that? And that was the kind of thing that fascinated me and why I got into reading and writing science fiction.
Well, it's like you said, right? There's more than just the chemicals, putting the two chemicals together and having a reaction. Science was also the numbers and the alignments and the dots connecting. Like you had to have certain things, and you had to dissect things. Like you had to pick the brains of a frog. Like you had to dissect the
Yeah.
frogs.
Well,
So
you think about that, so many things are so amazingly complex. And if they were a little bit different, they wouldn't work. From living things to, physical processes to our whole ecosystem, really, as we're
yeah,
learning to our dismay. You mess up something in one way, and this entirely complicated system can be thrown off balance. And as many people have said, if one little component of physics was different, our whole universe wouldn't exist. It would be all hydrogen atoms. There wouldn't be any heavier elements of which we are made. If it weren't for interstellar stellar explosions, novas, supernovas, things like that, there wouldn't be any heavy atoms of which we are made, carbon compounds and things like that. And if things were just a little bit different, if the rules of science and physics were a little bit different in the universe, there'd be nothing but this hydrogen gas throughout the universe, nothing else. So
yeah.
it's fascinating when you get down to how things are made, how things work, what makes them tick, whether they're living or physical or mechanical. It's always really interesting. And I still get off on a lot of that reading nonfiction books about all those things.
That's really cool. So Scott, I asked you to give me one word to describe yourself as an individual, and you gave me unconventional. Unconventional. Why that word?
For a lot of reasons, I think. I mean, not that many people would be at my age of life trying to be making a career in writing. I do live on an island, which is not for everybody. It's kind of strange. Even my radio career was certainly not the mainstream sort of thing, and there are just a lot of different ways. My wife and I, when we first got married, we went off to live in a school bus that was converted as a camper to go and find some place in the bush to go live. Didn't really work out, but that was the kind of people that we were and still are. So yeah, just kind of unconventional. And not everybody would say that, I think, if they knew me, because of course you're putting on this business like persona when you're in the business world, you're
Yeah,
making public appearances or whatever. But I would say that it's a fairly good one word description anyway.
I like it because it does describe you. It's just like your tea. It describes you to a T. You know.
Hmm.
So I asked you your favorite color, and you gave me the color royal blue. Why blue?
I thought about that. I mean, it's a rich color. I love the blue of the sky. I love the blue of the ocean, the blue of lakes, blue of water, all of those things that are really peaceful and calming to me and speak of nature to me, I suppose. I also love green vegetation, and yet I wouldn't have picked green as my favorite color. So I don't know. I guess I think it must be the sky and the water element that just appeals to me so much about blue.
Well, and you live on the water.
I do, yeah, and I've always loved it, and I loved it underwater too. I mean, I had my wife and I don't scuba dive a lot anymore, but we used to, and I just love it. I think that, yeah, first of all, I encourage everybody who can to snorkel because you know, with the dive mask you can see underwater, but then scuba diving itself, it is a whole other world. Northern Ontario lakes don't have all that much to see, but if you're going to someplace like the Caribbean and you go on a coral reef, I'm telling you, what's under the water can be much more beautiful than even all that gorgeous, gorgeous foliage up above, all the flowers and trees and everything, because they are just spectacular coral reefs. And so, yes, I love water. There's the short answer.
There you go. See, it all aligns. This is what it is, right? Our tea all aligns without us even realizing that it aligns. The colors, the words, the descriptions, and I kind of figured science, but I think you like history too because you like to go back in time, like you have the time travel. So there's got to be some history liking as well.
Well, it's interesting because there must be something in there too. I do read historical fiction. I just don't write it, but I do like to read it. And my daughter is a medieval historian. You've spoken to her
Yep.
on the Tea Time podcast. Her name's Danielle Sobolski, and she's called the 5 Minute Medievalist. She has a popular podcast on medieval subjects too, and maybe she got that through me too. Maybe it's genetic. I do love history too.
Yeah, I kind of figured you did. And I remember Danielle, like when before we went live, we were talking about Danielle, and there was like, oh, it's a small world. Didn't know she was your daughter, but married and different names and all of that. And that's what I mean. Like you just never know who you're going to meet, right? Things happen, and everybody can
Mhm.
go and check out Danielle's tea time as well. It's on the YouTube channel, and check out Scott's. It's kind of nice that I have father and daughter without even knowing that I was going to have father and daughter. So I like these surprises. It just brings it more home style for me that I had a daughter and father on the show.
Well, and she enjoyed being on your podcast too. So she said, "Oh, you'll like her. Yeah, she's nice."
Well, I try to be. I have my days. So,
Yeah.
Scott, if anybody would like to get your books or anything like that, where can they get them?
Where can they get the books?
Yeah.
Well, they can find my books anywhere. I mean, they are available through any online book outlet. The books are available in any kind of e format. They're available. I think we're breaking up a little bit, perhaps because my bandwidth is an issue here on in a remote location. So I'll maybe repeat that. The books are available as ebooks everywhere ebooks are sold. Kobo's, Kindle, anywhere else, Apple, Barnes and Noble, you name it. Even through my own website, scottoverton.ca, I have an ebook store. It's just a little bit more hands-on getting the books from my site to your e-reader. But they are also available print on demand anywhere. They aren't stocked in many bookstores, but they are available in paperback form pretty well everywhere. So you can buy them through Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever. In Canada, Chapters Indigo, you'd have to order them. That's all.
Awesome. So before we wrap up, Scott, we have less than a minute here. I want to put a shout out because you also have a podcast and it's called The Dead Air. So if anybody would like to tune into that, where can they get that?
Well, that one's just available where podcasts are found, but it's simply my novel Dead Air in podcast form instead of a complete audiobook. I just recorded it slightly more episodically. So it's that book, and there's nothing updated. It's not updated regularly. It is that novel, but kind of created as a podcast, just a different way of taking that same content and enjoying it.
Oh, awesome. So any final words before we wrap up?
No, but I just to say, well, it's been a pleasure, and we've had a great chat. We could go on for a long time, I know, but I do hope everybody will check out my website, which is simply www.scottoverton.ca, SCOTTOVERTON, and it has book trailer links. It has links to where to buy the books. It has sample chapters of the descriptions, the own bookstore. It has some of the things in audio and some free stories in audio and text. and a whole lot there. So you can spend a lot of time there and certainly learn about everything I've written.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Scott, for sitting and having tea with me. And it's so an honor that I got to meet your daughter and you as well. I will be back next week, same time, same place, next Thursday. But we have a little switch up next Thursday. So pay attention to Miss Liz's Facebook page because there's going to be a little surprise coming. And there's some more good news coming for all of the Tea Time guests that have been on Tea Time in the last 4 years. So there's lots and lots of surprises coming. So stay tuned. Check out Miss Liz's Facebook page. Check out the YouTube channel. And check out the website, www.misslizsteatime. And again, Scott, I really want to thank you for sitting and having tea with me tonight. And for all the viewers and listeners out there, I thank you. Without you guys, I would not be where I am today. So thank you so much for that. And stay tuned because there's lots of good news coming for Miss Liz and all of the guests in the future.